So, Guy, I did meet you through Natural Success Connections. We've both been through the Natural Success curriculum and met each other online through those same circles. And you're working in relationships nowadays. And so one of the things that you've said is that fixing your relationship might be the worst thing you can do. So what do you mean by fixing your relationship could be the worst thing you could do? It doesn't make sense.
Well, good to be here, Bevan, and good to be discussing these things, because I think it's such an important component of life, is relationships. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about, what it means to be in a relationship, and also how to sort a relationship out where it might have started off particularly well, or it sort of got stale, or it's gone on different tracks, but on the relationship question of fixing the relationship, we've talked about one of the premise of natural success being that focus creates reality. And if you set about fixing something, what are you implying? That it's broken, right? That it's broken and it needs fixing. So to fix something, you have to focus on what's not working and what's broken. So you look for what's not working and you make that kind of more important than the things that are working. So it all comes down to focus. What you focus on is what you get. And if you're focused on fixing yourself or compensating for your beliefs or fixing a relationship or fixing something, then you just get more of what you discover, which is what's broken. So for example, like I have a core belief, just as a personal example, of not being good enough. That's kind of my egoic belief. And the compensation for that is to learn more and to prepare more in order to be good enough. But no amount of study, no amount of preparation changes the core belief. In fact, it just tells my subconscious that that's what you need to focus on. It ensures that remains my focus, that I'm not good enough, you see. And study and preparation itself is not the problem. It's good to study. It's good to prepare. But if the motivation is to fix yourself, then that gives it its significance. It gives the broken component the significance. And conversely, when you're aware of what's in your heart and you make that your focus, then everything changes. And so the world starts to basically conspire to get us what we want. This is all familiar natural success stuff that will be familiar to you and perhaps many of your listeners. But putting on the filter of focusing on what's right, on what you would love, really shows us the opportunities and the contacts and the wisdom that supports the vision of how you want the relationship to be. So the moment you sort of set out to fix something, it warps your focus.
Yeah, so we're looking at, so I'm in a relationship and I'm out on the internet talking to people going, my relationship's in trouble. This is a problem. This is a thing. How do I fix this? How do I fix that? Yeah. What you're saying is that's my focus is entirely on what the problems are and what needs to be fixed. Yeah. And so that's what you mean by fixing it, is because if by fixing it, you're literally putting your energy into paying attention to the things that are wrong more than resolving it. What is it you'd love to have in that relationship? Do people even ask that question, I guess?
Yeah. And you bring up another good point there, is that when you set out to fix something outside of you, it's like it's not within you. And I think that's a really important point to make, is that anything that you're experiencing is your creation. It's your expectations, it's your focus, it's the actions that you take. That gives you your experience of life. And if that's not what you want, then you can't look for fixing it outside of yourself. You have to find that within yourself. And so it's looking at where your focus is. It's looking at what you really want, is defining where you want to go with it, rather than responding out of that hurt space of this isn't working and they don't like me and they don't respect me, or I'm not getting what I want, which is an external thing. It's like, it's their fault, or it's the relationship's not working, or it's not taking responsibility that your focus isn't right. It's not taking responsibility for you putting the focus on the things that you want. And I think that's a really important thing. Very rarely is the problem outside of us. It's inside of us.
Yeah, one of the words I heard you, I was thinking it, and up until then you said it, the word responsibility. Yeah. I think that's why I grimaced right at the beginning when you said, we create our own reality. We're creating that. And I felt that it was leading to that space, because that's to me is quite a hard pill to swallow to go on. You know, if I'm in a relationship and my relationship's in trouble, to be able to take that perspective and go, how do I take responsibility for that? Especially in now day and age when you hear so much about narcissism and all these things. The conversation goes right. A lot of focus around narcissism.
Yeah.
My partner's narcissistic, or they're not doing this, and I'm not getting support, and this did that. And that's very hard to take that, because if you're in a situation where you do have a partner who is not meeting your needs, I can see how people would have a hard time going, how's that my fault? Right. And it's the interesting word fault there too, but we're talking about self-responsibility. And I know I find it can be, I mean, I used to speak about it when I was much younger, talking about self-responsibility, but it took me probably 15, 20 years to really start to be able to really accept that from such a fundamental level. This is taking that self-responsibility is really hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. But you're right. I think there's a pendulum swing, isn't it, from being dictated to expecting, you know, life to be a certain way, and we see that pendulum swinging from following orders and just like accepting how things are and getting on with life, through to, oh no, you know, I need support, and the world needs to be on my side, and they can't be against me, and they must be nice to me, and, you know, I must be given consideration because I'm sensitive, and all of that. And I'm not being critical of that. I'm just going, at some point you have to draw the line, and in maturity, every mature person comes back to taking self-responsibility. You don't see good leaders going, it's not my fault. You know, they go, okay, here's the situation we're dealing with, and here's the responsibility that I'm taking for it, and here are the actions I'm going to take for that. It's taking back the power that the world dictates to you, you know, how you perceive it, and it's allowing you to regain the power of choosing, you know, what you make important in your life, and the decisions you make, rather than feeling that the world happens to you. You start happening to the world. And I think it's a really important evolution of humankind. The strongest, most powerful leaders have recognized that they get to choose, and that the power is within them. And that's kind of where we need to go. And relationships, remember, is just one component of life. And I've chosen to focus on it because it's familiar to all of us. We all have relationships with our parents, and then our siblings, and then our friends and teachers, and later on with partners. And so relationships kind of is a great reflector of all the other aspects of our life, because how we are in one aspect of life mirrors in the rest of it. And frequently people come to me with a relationship issue, but when we dig deeper, they got the same problem at work. It's like the work has got a similar energy to it, and so does their health, and so does, you know, other aspects of their life. And when we deal with one area, all the other areas tend to resolve them too, because it comes from that taking responsibility and starting to put focus on things that you do want, rather than the focus on things that you don't. So it's a wonderful learning. It's a very exciting, very empowering way to start looking at the world. And it's a wonderful journey. Yeah, I mean, it can be frightening, obviously, because it's change, and nobody's particularly good at change. And I think that's the value of having somebody who can help you through change. Because the more you dig your feet in, and the more you stick your head in the sand and deny change, the further you get left behind. Because the truth is, what are the two consistencies in the world? Taxes and change, and death.
Yeah.
But things change. Things are always going to change, and we kind of need to embrace that change, and go with it, and learn and grow, and keep learning and growing. And we do, life becomes very exciting and fun and full of opportunities. We start seeing the opportunities, and it starts with relationship. But I think, you know, relationship itself is I think it's a misunderstood concept. Most people, when they think of relationships, think of with other people. But until you internalize that and have a good relationship with yourself, I think we do other people a disservice. Maybe I'm running ahead, but you know, it's like, I don't know anybody who wants to have a relationship with somebody who's you know, who knows less than them, who is more depressed than them, that is, you know, less creative than they are, who are less generous, who are, you know, you pick any measurement, whether it's, I don't mind, health, anything. Nobody looks for a partner at a lower level than themselves, unless it's to make themselves feel good, which is toxic to start with. But very rarely do we look for somebody who's not as, at least at the same intellectual level or creative level or energetic level, or the same enthusiasm as you. So we look for people at the same level or higher than us. Now, you want somebody at a level that's higher than you. They're not looking for somebody with less energy than you. And so the way to get a fantastic partner is about working on yourself and becoming more creative and becoming more enthusiastic and becoming more, contributing. And then you lift yourself up to the level of the type of person you want, who's got integrity, who's got ethics, who's got morals, who's got, all the things that you're looking for in a relationship. You get somebody like that by being that. And then you come into their radar. That's how you find them. I think it's very unfortunate that the Western culture has had a long history of Disney-like films where there's a hero that rides in to rescue. And I think we've lost something in waiting for somebody else to come and find us and pick us up and fix us. I think it's time to put that illusion aside and go, you've got to knock on the door. You've got to lift yourself up. And in taking responsibility for yourself, you raise the level. You find a tribe at the level that you'd love to play at. But it's a self-responsibility thing. And that starts with you.
I love you just used right at the end there, you just used the word tribe, because the whole time you were speaking, I'm thinking we started out talking about relationships and my mind automatically went to romance, couples, marriage, dating. That whole conversation you was having then, I'm like, this applies to my friends as well. Like, I don't go seeking out people that I don't really respect or I think are low level or not very bright or, do things that I don't enjoy doing. I don't seek those kind of people out for friends. When I meet friends, I want to have an intellectual conversation, a connection with people that I respect, similar sense of humors and that kind of thing. I find people that are my tribe in that sense. So it was interesting. I noticed that. One thing I want to ask you, because you see a lot of relationship advice, especially on things like social media these days, and it also comes around from the world itself. Things like boundary setting and stuff like that. So often it's if you're in a relationship where things are, to use the word toxic, for example, or you're being used or manipulated or things aren't going the way you use, be willing to leave. And I personally find a lot of that, a lot of people, like, it becomes quite prescriptive. If you're in a bad situation, then leave, right? But we're talking about self-responsibility here. And now, of course, there's an element of it may be the self-responsible thing to do, or maybe not. I'm wondering where you go, because there's all sorts of prescriptive advice, like you should lead, or you should, it can go either way. It's like you should be an offer service to the other person. They come on and make sure you're giving and pull your weight, so to speak. At the same time, it's also set your boundaries and make sure that people aren't crossing your boundaries and things. But I think we're touching on something deeper.
It's not something that I would ever give generic advice on. It's like, oh, well, if they're doing this, then you must do that. It's like you have to deal with that question on an individual basis, because otherwise you're just making sweeping generalizations, and everybody's circumstances are different. And remember this, you see, I know people with incredible risk tolerance, and they can put up with an incredible amount of abuse in a relationship, and they never see it as extreme. They just go, I don't like it, but it's just how they are. And I see other people with a very low threshold where the person looks at them wrong and they're all offended, and it's like they looked at me wrong, and like they didn't give me the time of day, or and they get really hurt by minuscule things. And so you have to be very careful that you're dealing with a real issue, not a perceived issue. Because a lot of people will take offense at things that a partner will do to them to different levels. Somebody will say something and they'll shrug it off. And your ability to shrug stuff off means that when you express your dissatisfaction with a relationship, or your conflict within a relationship, not all descriptions carry equal weighting. And so I'm very aware of making sure that the issue that's being dealt with is a real issue. And that's often something that's worth doing from both sides. You would never just take a friend's word for how things are. You'd kind of want to weigh it up against the other party, because things tend to get a little bit exaggerated, a little bit sort of like dramatized or underplayed, depending on the person you're speaking to. And so you kind of want to be really careful of just taking it at face value. But at some point, we're talking about that self-responsibility. There's learning to be done. There's learning both on what sort of dynamic you've got playing out within the relationship. There's learning about what you want. And there's plenty of clients that I have that don't know what they want. It's like they've got some sort of illusion of it, but they've never actually sat down and gone, actually, no, this is the type of interaction that I want. This is the kind of support that I want. This is my tribe. They've never defined their tribe or their perfect intimate partner. They've done it on a very, well, that's what I've seen in the films, or that's what I've always imagined, but they've never come back to what's important to them. And conversely, it's like they don't know what's out there. So there is this fear, and you see it in abusive relationships where people stay and they stay and they stay, and that boundary gets crossed over and over again. But each time the person says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was just drunk. Oh, I was on drugs. Oh," and they come up with some excuse and they get forgiven, and then they repeat the abuse. And so that responsibility of being clear, A, on what it is that you would love, and B, what's the tipping point, and that takes courage, because the familiarity, the familiar is much more comfortable, even if it's horrific, than the unknown, and this fear of, well, if I don't have this, I might have nothing, and this might be better than nothing, is definitely an issue a lot of people deal with. But I think when you start exploring, your own power, you start exploring what's important for you, what's in your heart, that gives you that sense of confidence, and it helps you crystallize what is that boundary for me. So when somebody crosses it, it's like, no, sorry, that's not okay, and they call it at the time. And I think a lot of relationships, and I'm talking about romantic relationships, are greatly improved when one person is able to start articulating what that boundary is, and then consistently holding it and going, no, sorry, that's crossed the boundary. And not from an anger point of view of just going, I'm not accepting it anymore. But that's a personal power. And it comes not from, this isn't fair, and I don't want you to do that, but just like, no. And then if it's repeatedly broken, it's just like, well, there's nothing else I can do. Thanks very much. And that's the time to leave. But it's not a generic advice thing. It's a personal thing, and it comes from being really certain about what you want, where you're going, and what you're prepared to tolerate. And the more you do that, you see, the more you have that confidence to say, thanks, I'm done here. And frequently, just having that energy. It's not so much a spoken thing and what to say and how to act and how to be. It's a presence that kind of just tells the other person, I'm not messing around anymore. I'm not willing to compromise anymore. And that demands a respect. And when you own that, you kind of lift the energy. You go, here's the standard I'm operating at. And if you know anything about, the need to belong, we all start mirroring each other. There's this natural instinct to not just mirror voice tone, not just mirror hands or body language, but actually energetically match. And so if you hold that higher energy and just go, no, here's my level, this is where I'm playing, it gives permission for the other person to go, okay, I'll step up into my higher self too. And they'll do it unconsciously, which is why working on yourself actually is the best thing you can do, because it lifts everybody else around you.
So this is you're speaking from a very powerful position now with a lot of experience. You work in relationships and things, but I imagine it's not always been roses for you. At some point, you've gone on a learning journey. What was, I imagine that you've had challenges in the past? Like, what was it that led you to go onto this journey and get the realizations that you've had and able to articulate them and live from them now? Like, because
Oh boy. Yeah. I think everybody has moments through their past where they just sit and they hang their heads in shame and go, was I really like that? Oh, you know. And certainly I have my share of those, you know. It's like my turning point, because I came from I was born and brought up in Africa. I was born and brought up in Rhodesia and then Zimbabwe. And we had a very almost Victorian structure. It was definitely very male dominated. It was very much, you know, hunting, fishing, shooting, being a man, but also from that sort of Victorian era of courtesy and opening doors and being chivalrous and being the knight in shining armor and needing to you know be that courteous, constantly forgiving type person. And it kind of set me up for more difficult relationships because my wife is from England, and we were kind of stuck 20 years in the past in a society that no longer existed in the rest of the world. We had sanctions, and we kind of got caught up in a time trap. Um, I remember Fiona, for example, you know, when she first arrived at university, she tells a story of going to sit down and one of the guys jumping up and pulling out a chair and her thinking, you bastard, I was going to sit there, and then going and sitting somewhere else. And the confusion on the poor young man's face of going, oh, she obviously doesn't want my attention, and putting the chair back and then sitting back in his place, and her not understanding
wow,
chivalry generally, you know. And so we came from a slightly mismatched set of standards and things. The change really happened through natural success. I read The Magician's Way, William White Cloud's book, The Magician's Way, and it
yep,
kind of concretized for me a whole lot of things that I was trying to articulate. Um, and I was so excited having read it. It sort of had a whole lot of answers about things that I was trying to word, and they were beautifully expressed within the story, within the book. So I called him up and ended up doing you know, a year-long training, which was the very first toe into personal development I'd ever done. So it was a very steep learning curve.
okay,
But within that, learning, you know, my beliefs, and within my beliefs, what are the things that I hold as this is how it is, this is how I am, this is how other people are, and I find a lot of contradiction in that, because when I had to analyze that, I could see that was just an illusion. Okay, like my definitions for how I had to be, what I had to do just to exist and be attractive and be accepted by my wife were ridiculous. You know, they were standards that were pushing us further apart, not actually drawing us closer together. So understanding myself first and foremost was like a massive shift. On the back of which, you know, our relationship was good before, but it became much more intimate, much more honest, much more authentic, rather than me being the part and hoping that she liked that, but not actually understanding her. It was more about me being a certain way. And when I let go of that and didn't and stopped having to be a certain way, I was open to seeing what she really needed and listening to intuition and finding ways that we could actually connect on a much deeper level, um, over and above the pretense of what I thought I had to be to be liked by her or loved by her.
it's
It
funny. I
was
had
a big journey.
my coach the other night had a very similar story to talk about in the times, which I also related to back in the past, being attracted to somebody and being fearful that that relationship might end, and then started putting on masks and exaggerating those things that you think the other person might like or tolerate, and wearing that. And of course, it doesn't work, right? But that's an interesting that you've pointed on that same thing, acting from a what does the other person want from me rather than from your own self. You mentioned that you found the natural success work through reading The Magician's Way. Um, I imagine something would drive you to read that in the first. Like I know. It came to me through years back when I've went through a marriage long time ago, been divorced for over a decade now. But we were in the circles of Amway, and Network 21 at the time, and one of the guys we're working with got hold of these books and goes, "Here, this is one of the greatest books I've read," and handed it to me. And I read it, I don't know, I read it a number of times, and I got an audio book and listened to that 100 times, and just knew there was something in it, but I never could quite grasp it. It wasn't until I eventually just went, I need to go and find somebody that studied under this same stuff there's something in here. But what brought you into that book? Because I remember reading it and just going, wow, this is amazing. I don't get it. But that part of the journey, because obviously you were, pardon me. Well, obviously you were searching for something at the time, I imagine.
There is a good story behind it, and we've just launched a book called As If by Magic, and a number of us got together and wrote stories of real life incidences where you had to look at it and just go, that just happened magically. It's like there's no way of explaining the output of that, and just telling our story of how magic can happen. But that was a good example. That particular, I was a financial planner. And I moved to Australia to run a software company delivering financial planning software to financial advisors, and also training them on a fee-based model, on a lifestyle-based model of financial planning. And one of my clients read the book, and he said, "Oh, you should." And he put the copy in my hand. He said, "This is what you're talking about. It's like really getting clear on what it is that you want." And that was the methodology we were teaching financial planners of asking really good questions of their clients and their clients' family, of like, where's this family going? Where's the money flowing? What's the longevity of the family, and how do you want it to be? So that we can work towards that rather than just investing your money and you can do whatever you want with it. Let's really articulate the lifestyle you want. So the book wasn't dissimilar to that. It's all about, how do you find what's true for you to have? And anyway, so I read the book. I was incredibly, excited. I read it on a Tuesday, and I finished it on a Tuesday, should I say? And I phoned William the following day. I finally found a number. It took me 24 hours to find a phone number, and he wasn't actually available. I got hold of his assistant, and Claire said, "Oh, you just missed him. He's left." And I said, "Well, I wanted to talk to him." And she says, "Yeah, well, you can't, but you can if you phone back later. But by the way, he's running a course." And I didn't even hesitate. I just said, "Book me in. I'm going." And she said, "But I haven't told you how much it is, and I haven't told you how long it is." I said, "I don't really care. I love what I've read. I want to learn more. I just had this no, I'm coming." And she said, "Well, I better tell you anyway. It's a year-long course, and it's about $10,000 and airfares and accommodation and food." And and I reeled. It was just that was so far beyond my savings, so far beyond my means of achieving. It was just oh, okay, yeah, well, book me in, but I don't quite yet know. I hadn't. I needed to talk to Fiona about it at the very least, but I was terrified of going, honey, we can't really go on holiday at the moment, and we can't get the house we want, and we can't do this, but I'm going to go spend $10,000 and go and have a great time up and towards Byron. I was terrified. I just went, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't even know how to raise the conversation with Fiona, but book me in anyway, because I'm coming. It's just I just knew I wanted to be there. And so on the Thursday morning, I walked into work. We were in the software company, and my senior director walked past me in the cupboard, in the corridor. We greeted each other, and then he turned around after we'd passed and said, "Oh, by the way, I was talking to the group director, and he realizes that you haven't done any training for 2 or 3 years. You need to do some training. Have you got any courses in mind?" And it was well, actually, I do. I've got this course in mind. And he was disinterested. He said, "Great, book yourself in, do it." And I had to repeat Claire's words, "But I haven't told you how long it is or how much it is." He said, "I don't really care. If you think it's worth doing it, go for it." And so within 24 hours, I had everything paid for. And that was my first lesson in natural success, before I even knew how natural success worked. I mean, I read the book and Focus Creates Reality and the magic golf lesson and all of that. And I clearly had the focus. I'm going to this course. Don't know how to achieve it, but I'm going. And that's what I tell. That's my chapter of the book. But that was my introduction to it. And I look back and just go, what a fantastic lesson to learn right at the beginning, to then use it as an example as I learned the mechanisms of what I'd done
Yeah.
to achieve it.
Well, you're not the first person to tell me a similar story like that, about deciding to do something and then out of the blue, within a very short amount of time, the answer, that the solution pops up.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if they always pop up straight away either. I mean,
As if by magic.
but
Magic is
yeah,
real.
yeah. Do you want to tell us some more about that book then? Because as if by magic, as I said, I've mentioned to you that I've met some other people involved in that. It's how did that? What's the premise of the book? Of course, as if by magic. I think we're touching on that. I assume I haven't read.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it's everyday people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different continents, sharing this awareness that things happen magically, and there's a wonderful cross range of stories, but the theme is the same. There's something that people want. There's no way of getting it. It's an impossible situation. There's no way of actually, it's like, how's that going to work? But when there's a surrender to it, things happen that you could never have. You could never in a million years have engineered the solution. But when you're clear on what you want, and you're focused on what you want, and you take action to what you want, miracles happen. It's like this extraordinary things happen. And it's kind of a story to reinvigorate, in a very systemized, scientific, logical world, this idea that magic can still happen. Extraordinary things can happen out of the blue. And if you just rely on what you've always had in the past, your history of this is how it is, you close yourself off to a much larger energy that the world has kind of forgotten. I think, again, it's a bit of a pendulum. It was very much there before the Industrial Revolution, and then the Industrial Revolution kind of puts everybody in a box. You have to be a machine operator or a business owner or a this, and it kind of pigeonholes you, and it cut down a lot of the mythology and this connection to nature and connection to the possibility of magic happening. And I think we're seeing a resurgence of that. I mean, if I go back to, because the story happens in 2006, so a good long time ago, and at that time, for me to take the concept of intuition, the concept of magic, into the financial planning industry, which is the industry I've working with lawyers, accountants, financial planners, a very professional environment, was very difficult. It's like even talking about these issues was like, well, that's just woo-woo. But now, every CEO that I've ever coached is very happy to have a coach that helps them with intuition. In fact, their interview for any of that executive type position expects you to have, at the very least, strong intuition, strong sense of being able to see things without knowing, is be able to work against the evidence or the data, where you see it's right. And certainly when it comes to relationships and people, they want their senior managers to have access to emotional intelligence and a deep sense of knowing their own limitations and beliefs, all of which 15, 20 years ago was kind of like, oh, that sounds a little bit like dubious. But now it's taken for granted, and now taking this work into the corporate world is much easier, much easier. So things are changing. That pendulum is swinging back to this acceptance that magic can happen. Is fortunately for humankind, much more acceptable and readily accessible, and I love that.
It's interesting talking about that self-responsibility and creating your own reality, because you tell that story about it becoming more acceptable in the corporate world. And I was working in web development, and I find my experience has been the opposite of that. Like it's just got harder and harder. Because one of my drives actually is because I know I move in those circles. At my time working as a web developer, it was always show us the data, show us the proof. Like that's you drop the word intuition and they get laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
Right. I don't work on hunches. We only work on data. We got to see the facts. We got to everything. Blah, blah, blah. And I found it exhausting because and this is just highlights kind of my same mythologies where I'm creating these same powerlessness. I'm up against these people that I just can't I'm not allowed to use my intuition. I'm just not allowed, kind of thing. And I found that even situations where I just know what the answer is, and you go, it's this, and they go, you need to prove it, and then you spend 4 days proving it, so you could spend half an hour implementing it, and you're like, and I used to find it exhausting. But I know moving those circles, I find, especially because there's a lot of, I think it's because I'm a coder, right? A developer. It all is all logic. It's all systematic. This. You figure out how the system works. Constant refrain of developers are problem solvers. Our job is to find problems and solve them. And I'm like, but what are we creating? Like, this is, you just, and not, my entire career was just constant problem after problem after problem after problem. And so, but it shows it's.
Yes, I really hear that, because it's emblematic of where culture has gone. But if you go back to early science, it was all intuitively based. They got an idea and went, "Oh, I'm going to explore this idea," and then they set about proving it. But they had the intuition first. It's like, here's the apple dropping. So what? I'm going to explore something that I suspect. I think the Earth's round, but how do I go about proving that? They had the intuition first, and then they found the evidence for it. And we've gone into a scientific world where you have to have the evidence before you can make any claims. Like it has to be all evidence first, and there is no intuition. And it's taken away a lot of the creativity that science used to have. The inquiring mind used to be a standard for any person. Actually, scientists were very creative people, and now they tend not to be very creative. They tend to be very dogmatic. And I think we've got the the tail wagging the dog now in where we've gone with it. But it's a pendulum, and I think it's swinging back.
Yep. I agree with that. I think they do swing. I think I've got, how do you say, the pendulum's not linear. I often find there's not one. The polarity happens, but it kind of can be happening all sorts of ways at the same time, which is so that's where I see it. You're experiencing this change, but in my microcosm area, there's a different rhythm happening, and that's a reflection of my experiences too, right? Because I know people in my same role who wouldn't tell the same story I've told at all, right? They go, what do you mean? That's what everybody's like. That's, because I know I can see the pattern. I went from job to job to job to job up against the same challenges of opinions and attitudes repeatedly over and over with that same dogmatic, no, we need the facts, no, we need that. And I speak to other people who are just raving about the change that's happening in the industry, and I'm like, where is that? Right?
Where's that company? I want to work for that company.
Yeah, until funny enough, I think it was a sign I was completely on the wrong path, because I've just left it, and I'm so much happier now that I've just, that was probably a sign that, Bevan, that's not where you should be anyway. That's why we keep giving you the roadblocks, I think. But what
your opinion is of Google, there has to be some credit given, because when I was doing my degree, you're talking about that very rigid sort of work structure. But to a large degree, companies like Google introduced a whole new way of being, like open, work areas, play areas, bean bags, informality, creative days where it's just like, give us some ideas. It's like, let's just make stuff up, listening to people and allowing their intuition to inform things that the business created. There's a lot of mixed feelings about who runs the company and things like that. I'm just going back to the fact that they were trendsetters in their age and broke a system and completely turned around that very formal Silicon Valley thinking of like money, and you do what I say, and you're the developer and I'm telling you what to code, and breaking that and just going, make it up, tell us, and try some shit, and then we'll see if it works. So credit due for that aspect of the business. I'm not shouting their praise in every aspect, but in terms of leading that change and being more creative and allowing intuition to be part of the story, they were forerunners.
Yeah, they did. They were known. We used to talk about it at work. You
want
to be like Google. Like that.
They were emulated by a lot of people, and credit to that.
Yeah, and willing to explore other things. So what sort of transformations have you seen with people through your work? Right, you obviously working as a coach in this, working in that area of relationships, but
Oh my goodness. How many stories could I tell you? You know, I'm not telling you who they were, so there's no confidence breaking, and you wouldn't know who it was. But you know, there's some wonderful stories about, like I have a client whose son was very estranged, and who'd sworn that she would never see him again, and certainly never see her grandchildren again, and that was of incredible pain to her. And we set about going, well, we'll stop trying to pander to him and giving him the power, and going, oh yes, my son, and I'm so sorry, and because that just empowered and inflamed him, and irritated him even more and more. And so rather than trying to fix him in order to get access to her grandchildren, she's just started holding the vision of having time with her grandchildren. And she stopped trying to pacify him. She stopped trying to, you know, fix her son, and get him to see a specialist for his, you know, ADHD, or, you know, whatever things that he had, or his depression, or whatever she thought it was, or bipolar, whatever that he was dealing with. And she just focused on what she wanted. And within 4 months, he was knocking at her door going, hey, um, is it okay if I leave the kids with you for, the afternoon? And then it became a regular thing. And then he was inviting her up to spend time in their house. And, you know, and the important thing is she's just holding. The wonderful thing, the amazing thing to me, the one that gives me goosebumps, is that the first time she walked into her grandchildren's house, having not seen them for 3 or 4 years, they ran and threw themselves into her arms, because she'd been holding nightly that sense of love and connection, and sure as nuts, I don't mind what you say about how unlikely it is, they recognize that. And they just took one look, and both of them turned and ran and threw themselves into her arm. Granny. It's like, how do you account for a connection that's been absent in a child's life for the majority of their life? She knew them when they were tiny, like, you know, kids, but now they were sort of 5 and 6, and they knew her. Like, it was as if she'd never been out of their lives. They were just thrilled to see her, and instantly into, come, let me show you, you know, my drawings and this, and playing. Well, you can imagine how, you know, she was in tears about that, and that's continued now. You know, that she's put that whole feud behind them, and she has this beautiful relationship, which got out of hand. He wanted her to look after the kids sort of like 5 days a week, and she would, no, actually, that's too much. And she pushed back a little bit, and now they got the perfect balance of her with regular access, and playing frequently, and being very much part of their lives. I have stories of relationships that have both healed, but also broken apart, and then people finding partners that actually suit them far better. So there's endless stream of stories of people ending up in a much deeper, more meaningful, more wonderful space, not just with themselves. And I think that's where it starts, but being much more comfortable, you know, in their own abilities, and what they want, and then finding that either that partnership was destined for the rocks, because the other person was never going to change, and they had changed immeasurably, or some of them where the partner mind-blowingly suddenly starts softening, and starts, you know, being curious and asking questions, and going, you just seem so much happier, and I still feel totally depressed and angry, and you're just not buying into that anymore. What's the secret? I want in. I want what you've got. I don't know what you've been taking, but whatever it is, I want it. And lifting themselves, and starting to be curious, and attending, you know, meetings, or just listening to what that person's learnt themselves, and therefore going on the same journey as them, and choosing to be with them and not left behind. So, endless stories of huge success on a relationship front. But it's all about knowing yourself, you know, both your higher and your lower. It's no good standing on a pedestal and going, here's my lofty vision of what I want. You actually have to stand on that humble, honest, vulnerable space of knowing your dysfunctional beliefs, and the strategies that you employ to compensate for those because structure has integrity. It's another premise of natural success, isn't it? So putting a structure in place that keeps you awake to your true nature, but also awake to your strategies, and then making choices with intention and in favor of the things that you love, and that takes will. So there are sort of foundational cornerstones of the work, like will and knowing yourself, and honesty, really having integrity and the ability to go vulnerable. Having an intuitive trained outsider is also something that I think's made a massive difference, to help with change and to give honest perspective. It's not always an easy journey, but having somebody who's trained in this work to keep you on the straight and narrow and keep you focused is also a very valuable component of that.
It's very easy to get lost, and I find myself having a coach, at the very least, it gives me that regular check-in to stop, and it's built in. It's not something I need to force myself to do. There's a certain level of accountability to stopping and resetting every so often. A thread I've seen through this is this sense of vulnerability. We spoke about it before, about in relationships acting in such a way as you think the other partner might want. So my coach mentioned it. I've done it myself in the past, trying to change yourself and act in certain ways. You just told it about that woman with her son. Stop trying to please him and just focus back on what it was she wanted. We saw the self-awareness I really wanted to touch on, because you did mention both sides of that. I feel, and I can fall for it. The self-awareness, it's easy to fall into the trap of that, meaning, especially when you also think about vulnerability, it's being vulnerable to accept what your flaws are and being open and honest about that. And I think some people probably get caught in that same trap of going from almost the opposite of a narcissist to, well, this is my flaw and I've got this flaw and I don't do this well and I don't handle this. And when I'm in relationships, I tend to act well, and there's a lot of not acknowledging the other side of what is it that you're looking at, all the challenges you've got, all the and even in a very open, honest way, you're looking at yourself, but you're still not acknowledging the whole picture. Right? There's two sides of that coin, the higher and the lower side of that.
Well, I think you bring up a really important thing, because I'm not sure, we talk about natural success. We're both familiar with it. Many of your listeners would have read the book or gone through the courses and things, but some won't. And I think it's worth just going back to the basics of this premise of duality, that there are two orientations to live life through. And one orientation, as you know, is living with that filter, if you like, of your childhood formation and the beliefs and the definitions for yourself and how others are and how the world works. And the interesting thing to know about that is that when you look for evidence to support your worldview, you find it. 400 billion bits of information, you put a filter on that says, give me something that proves that I'm right, you'll find the evidence, and that filter.
Irrefutable evidence. I've been through that. I know this is intellectually, I know it's not true, but
not good enough. The rest of them are bastards. You can't trust the world. It's like you create the evidence, though. You only see what supports your worldview, and then the other side of that duality that you've been talking about is based on premise. It's based on principle. It's being awake to your heart and your true purpose, and living to shine and courageously discover the things that you love doing, and then doing those things. And it's an orientation that makes some key assumptions. Let's face it, there are some assumptions in there, some premise that we just go, okay, well, let's assume this to be true. But it gets the result as if those premises were true. And it's basically just choosing another filter to see yourself, just to see others, to see the world through. And as in the first orientation, you then find evidence to prove that's true. And of course, it's a much more exciting, much more progressive, much more love-filled journey when you make those assumptions and look to find the evidence to support them. And everything we've been talking about in terms of relationships starts with that intention to be at that higher level, to find your own heart, the stuff that actually really matters to you. And it's reclaiming the power of being the master and commander of your own destiny. Something which not everybody takes into the relationship. They take often an assumption that the other person is going to provide the energy or going to provide the support or the care or the love or the solutions, or make them feel good. But nobody can make you feel good. Only you can make you feel good.
Yeah. So there's this duality of it, right? That's where I find really thinking about the two sides of it, exposing yourself to both sides of that bitter pill. We talked about it earlier, the self-responsibility, right? And I know it's my tendency, and it's probably the same as a lot of other people, to go, it's why I say it's a bitter pill. I've got to take self-responsibility. It's on me. But the interesting point is when you look at the whole picture, right? You go in there and you go, okay, these are my dysfunctional formations. These are the challenges that I experience. These are the things I do. But when you take that self-responsibility into also, what do I love? What would I love to create? You suddenly find that fear you've got of taking self-responsibility. It's also, I love the phrase, if the shoe fits, wear it. Reminds me of, because so many people take that negatively as well. It's like, if you've been accused of something negative, well, then you should take that on board. Yet the story of Cinderella is exactly about a shoe fitting, and it's exact opposite story. This is about somebody who's grown up in a small, in the basement, getting abused in toxic relationships. But the shoe that fitted was the shoe of a princess who was freedom and powerful. And I think there's a power in that, taking that self-responsibility when you stand into who you really are and take responsibility for that. It seems scary at first because you can imagine from Cinderella's perspective, you go, Cinderella, you need to accept who you are. And she goes, well, I'm the poor girl that works in the basement. Yeah. But the ultimate truth of the whole story is she's also a beautiful woman that's attractive to the prince and is born of royalty, right? This is the and so that self-responsibility sounds like a bitter pill, but it's not, right? This duality of self-responsibility encompasses
You've touched on the hero's journey, which is kind of like the foundation learning of natural success, that we are born as divine beings, as royalty, and everybody's familiar with the hero's journey. But you then go into hiding, and nobody in any hero's journey, any adventure, we watch the films, we read the books, and the people go on adventure. They're not having a cool time. It's like, they are scared, and the dragon's about to, burn them to a cinder, and they've got to take these risks and take these steps of courage. There's this leaps of faith. They're not cool times to live through. They're terrifying times. That's kind of what makes the adventure an adventure, isn't it? Like, learning by facing adversity, by facing danger, and coming through at the other side wiser and full of knowledge. And it's only in hindsight they look back and go, wow, that was some ride, But yeah, you're right. It takes courage. It does take courage, which is why having somebody there to hold you and reassure you and keep you focused on the treasure at the end of that journey is really important. Because often you lose sight of that and just go, you know what? I just want to go back to being a pig farmer. I'm happy in my with my pigs. So just take away all this responsibility and the fear and the doubts. Let's go back to simple.
Yeah, it's funny how much of this turns out to be fairly self-evident and worked into our mythology and culture anyway, because we've spoken about the word leap of faith and the hero's journey. So kind of a lot of people might be aware George Lucas was very well aware of the hero's journey when he wrote Star Wars, for example. Then he also did Indiana Jones. So you got Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail, right? Yeah. And there's that scene where Indiana Jones is in that cave going to get the Grail that's in there, and there's that big abyss, right? And then he's got there's an illusion where there's a place he can stand, but it's hidden under illusion, and he's got to take that step into the abyss and risk. And funny, Indiana Jones being as tough as he is, but that sense, I just reminded of that same scene where here you are he's got to take that leap of faith. That's what it's not even hidden in the movie. That's exactly what that's about, testing you for your leap of faith. But that idea of that abyss, that terror, is something that comes up in you, and it's a very good example of you don't necessarily know. Like, it's such a good story, but
isn't it fantastic how science has moved into being able to study and penetrate what's going on in our minds. But you'll know that the fear of facing, say, humility, being humiliated, or the fear of failing, depending on your nature, triggers exactly the same area of your brain as the fear of death. Yeah? To individuals, it's to the mind, it's no different. That leap of faith, the threat is death. You're going to die, and whether that means being rejected and therefore left out in the cold and not part of the tribe, you're going to die. Like that. That's psychologically, that's what's going through your brain. If I don't succeed at this, if I'm not good enough, if I'm not acceptable enough, if you're not, if I don't belong, I'm out. And if I'm out, I'm dead. And that's the fear. So it's a very real thing. It's like we laugh about it, and when we're talking like this, going, oh, you just got to sort of man up in some ways. You just got to accept that, and it might be a bit scary, but you just got to get over yourself. But it's worth just going back to the roots of that fear and going, it's a very real emotion, and it can feel like I'm going to die, and that's because it's triggering exactly the same part of your brain that's triggered when you're faced with a death situation.
See, I know part of my cynical mind comes up too. So sometimes it's true, right? Sometimes you die, right? That happens. That's a fact of everyday, ordinary life.
People don't.
But I love how Magician's Way kind of touches on that at the end of it. It's sort of what other choice? What like there's no guarantees. Kind of like rolling the dice. There's no guarantees that taking this action's going to lead to the life of your dreams and stop you from dying.
Yeah.
But what's the alternative, right?
Regret.
Yeah, well, that's horrible. But there's no guarantee that you'll thrive, but it's the best hope you've got, right? Because it's almost death is guaranteed the other direction, right? You're just gonna whittle away and die. And I think that's coming back. We've said it a few times, that hard pill to swallow. Sometimes this, I think it's easy to go from a very cynical, there's no point in doing anything, it's terrible, to going to, hey, if I just go for it, everything will magically happen. And it probably will, because now you're operating from a much more powerful position and making wiser choices. But that's the vulnerability we spoke about. You need to be open to the fact that it could go wrong, right? So you're we talked about some of your relationships where people, you've mentioned there's people who've been in relationships and then left that relationship and moved on to another one.
Yeah.
And I imagine that because I've been similar, I went through a divorce, and it was all I wanted to do was resolve that relationship, to fix it. That's where it started. Wanted to fix the relationship. What do I do? Yeah. And I was stuck in that for years.
Yeah.
Right. Need to fix that, resolve. I want that back. What I had, so afraid to lose that, and that real fear of death. And then when it actually went, what do I really love? And I'd love this. And you go, well, the kind of that relationship's got nothing to do with what I love. And they started to be able to move on and let go. And I'm a transformed person now. And I'm not in another relationship, but I'm not suffering from that either. I'm quite happy where I'd love to have one. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. I'm building so many things in my life. And it's not the first time structures in my life have completely fallen down. And you feel like that you go through the phoenix rising from the ashes kind of thing. You go, everything fell apart. It was absolutely horrible and painful. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Sure.
But now I'm happier than ever before.
I think you bring up another good point, and that is that we think of the hero's journey as a single circle. But within that, a constant returning to the hiding, and then coming out and facing the journey, and then refusing the journey, refusing the challenge, and going back into hiding, and going forward, and then going back into hiding. There's little circles that go within. We can get caught in a component of the hero's journey for decades sometimes, and we never lose our beliefs. We talk about learning them and addressing them and understanding our compensations to them, but they never change. There's a strong push in the Western culture and lots of modalities going, come work with us for a lot of money and we'll help you forget that you ever had beliefs. And it's rubbish. You never forget your beliefs. Your beliefs remain till the day you die. But the wonderful thing is you don't need to fix them. You don't need to solve them. You don't need to purge them. You don't need to, get rid of them in any way. You just need to acknowledge that they're there and act from a different space, from the other side of duality. Stop giving them the power. And the more you try and fix them and change them, the more you just reinforce that they're a big, ugly problem, and that's more of what you get, more of what you create. And so this repeated cycle. So, for example, the woman whose grandchildren she has in her life, her relationship with her son didn't just miraculously suddenly become all, harps and roses and wonderful. She's gone through some hard times with him because he relapses back into what he relapses into, and she's had to deal with the fallout of that and have to draw the lines again. And they have this on-off relationship. And it's not always just perfect, but she's constantly holding that higher energy, and she's always got back and had that special time and been able to shield her grandchildren from the worst of it. So it's not everything's roses or everything's horrific, but when we choose that higher path, then as you've found, you might have lost your relationship, but there's a much higher sense of satisfaction and understanding of who you are and delight in where you've got to. And I think that's very much a part of the learning exercise is to go and have that fear and to face the fear. And sometimes we need to go through that process, a number of times at the level that we're working at. And then guess what happens? You step up to a higher level and you go on the journey all over again at a higher level. Anybody who runs a corporation, any CEO, they weren't born to be a CEO. They started off as a junior manager or as somebody just, coming out of university and intimidated by running a team of 10. And then they ran a team of 100, and then they ran a team of 1,000. And each time was like, oh, geez, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with it? And the same with relationships. You want a higher and higher relationship, but the risks of being at that higher level, the emotions are deeper and more connected, and you explore at a deeper level, which opens you up to a whole lot more sensitivity. And so you still feel, an increased sense of vulnerability as you move into a deeper and deeper relationship with somebody. So it's not like, click, it's all fixed and now it's all just beautiful roses and everything's going to always be good. You end up dealing with it at a higher and higher level, and consequently getting more and more satisfaction from it, more and more flow of love. And of course, we think of relationships as a very static thing. There's me, there's them, and we've got a relationship. But they're an evolving being. I'm an evolving being. And so we're changing. And if we're not changing in the same direction, we can drift apart. And we're not even talking about all the hormonal changes that go on through somebody's life, from being a hot young stud to being a 55-year-old, there's change. And my wife's been through, a lot of change from wanting children and now like past that side, and our children are just leaving home. And so we change, not just in terms of what we want, but mentally, physically, and what we're learning and growing with. And all of those need to be taken into account when you're looking at the relationship. It's not a static, okay, I've got a relationship with somebody. It's an evolving situation that changes sometimes seemingly daily. And you need that sense of integrity and confidence in yourself to manage that and watch the other person go through change as you're going through change, and to back them with that. It's a wonderful area to work in, absolutely wonderful area to witness and to see people reclaiming that sense of authority.
Before I move into some of my closing questions, we've spoken a few times about structure, which reminds me of structures in relationships. You touched on it earlier about, I think most of the viewers here would be aware of the term codependent. It gets thrown around. I think everybody knows what codependence is, but that's obviously just a relationship of a structure with when you've got two people depending on each other to an extent. For your experience working with relationships, what else is there? What sort of experience? Like what are the structures of relationships?
The relationship, world is understanding structure, and as you say, it's one of the premise of natural success that structure has integrity. If you have a particular cookie cutter, shaped like a Christmas tree, that's a structure, and every time you use it, guess what shape you're going to produce? And it doesn't matter how many times you use it, you still get the Christmas tree, same size, same shape. That's the structure. So
throw it at a wall, you still get a Christmas tree imprinted.
It doesn't matter how much you want the heart, you're just going to get a Christmas tree until you change the structure. You need something in the heart shape to get a heart-shaped cookie. And if you want a smaller one, you need to change the structure to a smaller one. And so relationships are also conveniently categorized by certain into structures, and they have components that together give a very clear picture, give a clear structure. And one of them, as you mentioned, is codependency, which comes from that expectation or the belief that fundamentally you're flawed, that there's something within you that's broken, something missing. And again, this is probably the most common one, and it's been expounded in so much of our romantic storytelling in Western culture, that there's another person out there who is also broken, but broken in ways that you can fix, and you're broken in ways that they're strong in, and so they will complete you. You're not complete without the other person. And so you have this dynamic where you go into the relationship going, I'll fix what's broken with them, and they come in saying, well, I'll fix what's broken with you, and it'll be wonderful, because together we'll be two whole individuals, more than just the pair of us. But it comes in with the understanding that I'm broken and you're broken. And then the dynamic evolves into basically making the person dependent on you so they don't leave. And that becomes the ultimate focus. What can I do to make them more and more dependent on me, even if it means undermining the very thing that attracted me to them in the first place? And so you make them dependent on you for an aspect of life, and they're doing the same thing with you. And it just becomes a downward spiral on making them more and more dependent. And the energy level drops, Um, and so yeah, that's a very common misconception born out of a belief that's how relationships work. You fix each other. But there are other structures, other common structures. We're familiar through films and things like that of power and control, of having one person dominant and the other person completely relinquishing their power to the other person. Oh, I don't know as much as you do, and you're so much cleverer than I am, and you just make all the decisions. I'll just go along with what you want. And that power and control structure requires one person to relinquish their energy, their power, their say, completely to the other. And of course, you can feel the energy just dying, and that person just not self-actualizing and taking responsibility. And so that's a good one to look at. And then, of course, everybody knows somebody who's in that frame of mind where they just don't trust anybody else. And so they go into relationships at arm's length. It's kind of, they hold everybody just like, don't come close. It's like, I'm happy to be with you, but just I'll give you a hug, one of those sort of hugs, like, don't get anywhere near me, because they've grown up with a belief that when they are intimate with somebody, that person takes their power, takes their energy, takes it out of them. And so they're just constantly there, needing a little bit of connection, so that they arrive at the yoga club. I love these guys. They arrive at the yoga club, but they're never on time. They're like 2 minutes late. So the class has just begun, and they slip in at the back. And then they're doing their yoga and feeling the energy and the love and feeling that they're part of something. And then everybody sort of packs up and does their things, and they're about to have a cup of tea and share a few things. And what happened to Janet? Oh, no, she had to leave. She's gone before anybody can sort of take that energy back from them. But you spot them a mile off. That kind of need to suck life out of a straw rather than just be in life and risk being, a part of something. So they kind of hold themselves back. But all of that is within your power to totally change. All of that is entirely up to you to shift and take back your energy, so that you stand in your own space as a powerful individual, and you allow other people to do the same. And when you have that sense of sovereignty, then you give permission to other people to have sovereignty. And then when you meet, you're not overlapping your energy. It's like you meet as sovereigns, as kings and queens would. It's like with dignity and care, and going, if that's what you want to do, you do that. But here's what I'm going to do. And you own your responsibility of your standards and what it is that you're going for, and what's important to you. And of course, from that space, you can afford to be incredibly vulnerable, because you're not really caring about other people's opinions. It's like, I just have to be comfortable in my own self. And therefore, I'm quite comfortable to talk about what I fear and what I'm not sure about, and I'm quite happy to ask for help when I need it, or to say, I'd rather not do that. I'm going to do this, and of course, that's all about building your sense of what's important to you. And I think this is where a lot of the common knowledge comes from. Going, you've got to maintain your boundaries. You've got to maintain your own standards, and it's true, but not in some sort of protective way of going, they can't do this to me, and I've got to be careful and hold myself separate from that. But in terms of actually knowing what it is that's important to you, and not being dragged into the dirt when people are playing a different game to yours. So I think there's a distinction between boundaries, which in itself kind of makes sense. It's like logical sense. You've got to maintain your boundaries, but not if that cuts you off from connecting to others. You maintain those boundaries by being that sovereign individual, confident within your own knowledge of your own weaknesses, but also your own power, and clear on what your focuses are. And those are healthy boundaries that allows you to prevent people just riding roughshod over you or dominating you, or just like taking advantage, or trying to fix you in any way. It's like, yeah, thanks very much, I'm good. So those dynamics are very valuable to know and to understand, because they are structures that you can then change into that functional mode from either codependent or the power and control, or that aloof sort of lone wolf type mode into a functional relationship. And it does, it transforms your life, absolutely transforms your life, not just on a romantic sort of individual basis, but with family members, with friends, with business colleagues, with strangers. Your ability to walk into networking events and be that confident person, and people with that, like you and I know that in a restaurant, if somebody walks in with that energy of like, hey, here I am, like there's a hush, and people just naturally turn and go, whoa, the boss just walked in. It's that kind of energy. And you can engineer that, that you can learn that to hold that space around you. And of course that's what's incredibly attractive. If you ask me what's the single most attractive thing in somebody, it's that inner confidence. When somebody presents with that just sense of certainty about who they are, that's the most delicious, seductive thing that you can be.
Sounds wonderful.
Confidence is sexy. Yeah.
Yeah. So putting our perspective on, if there's somebody out there at the moment who's hearing all this and going, that sounds wonderful, but at the moment their experience is that they're stuck, or they're in a relationship where they're feeling distant and not able to connect. So either stuck in something that feels like it's the wrong place to be, or they're in a distant relationship where they can't have what they want. What's the one thing we can really give that to somebody from that perspective? You're not experiencing everything you'd love to have in relationships. Yeah. What's one takeaway they can have to implement?
Oh, it's a good question. Hey, and I think to a degree we've kind of touched on it already. It's like, stop making it about the other person and start making it about what you want. Like, just stop focusing on what you don't want and get honest with yourself about what turns you on. Like, what lights you up. When you are like that, when you are awake and confident about what you want and set on your path, you become the most desirable person in the room. Yeah. So if you want attention from your partner, then start finding your soul mission. Start finding your passion, yeah, and do them. Do what fills you up. Do what makes you sparkle. Do what puts that sort of twinkle in your eye and that little step, and that sense of like life in you. Start shining from inside, and stop making excuses that it's the other person's fault, yeah. And that can feel terrifying. Of course it can. We've discussed that. But if you have to start saying, you have to start saying yes to things that are true for you to do. Yeah. And ultimately, if a partner is not inspired by what you do, about what you love, and is not re-engaged with you that is on fire by doing what you love, then you have to think, maybe it's time you moved on. You have to thank them for what you've learned, maybe for taking you to this space, and make space for someone who is at your new level. If they're not prepared to shift, there is a point at which stage you just go, we've outgrown each other. But stop blaming them for holding you back. Yeah, we have in the Western society become so entitled that we forget that we have to create our own happiness. Happiness isn't anybody else's responsibility. So start by being responsible for your own actions. Yeah, we're creating the truth is we're creating every experience we have. You see, when you can own yourself as a creator, you acknowledge that the experience you're having of life is created by you. So stop creating more of what you don't want and start creating the life that you do want. And no one is going to make that happen for you, despite the endless romantic stories we've referred to and the knights of shining armor and saving the day and whatnot, you're not going to suddenly win the lotto. You're not going to suddenly, fall into the lap of luxury by sitting on the sofa and feeling sorry for yourself. You're not suddenly going to feel happy. You're not suddenly going to fall in love. You have to step up and risk, finding the right person by being the person that you'd love to meet. I don't know if that's a little bit over impassioned way of answering that question, but like I do feel very strongly about it, and I'm happily sort of like hold my own in this discussion and go, this is you struck to the real heart of what I'm passionate about, and that is that self-empowerment, that self-responsibility. Make it about.
So if you've discovered what you love and you're going for that, then
the rest will fall into.
You've got nothing to, right. There's nothing to lose. You've created everything you love.
Yeah, and your partner will either come with you on that journey and be thrilled that you're now the fun-loving, excited, energized person. You see, and I tend to think of partnerships in terms of like a bank, bank account. It's like a bank account of energy. And there's two of you putting in. And in the early days, you both put in heaps of credit. You bring your laughter, you bring your ideas, and we listen and discuss and we show our concern. And all of that builds up this credit, that I care for you and I've got ideas and you've got ideas and we'll find the best ideas between us. And you build that credit, which you can then later draw on. You see, later in the relationship, and kids come along and there's business stresses and you're doing your thing, is that we get busy. And you get busy with the kids and maintenance of the house and the garden and obligations other than our relationship. And so we start taking the relationship for granted. We start taking from the relationship more than we're putting into it. Yeah. And we leave the time that we're together as the last priority until the end of the day when everything else is done. And by that time, we're exhausted. We just flopped on the surface. We're not at our best. But, they'll understand because we can rely on them. They know I love them. I don't have to say it. I'm too exhausted to prove anything or to do anything. But, they know I've got credit in this relationship. And at this stage, we're drawing down on the relationship account. We're just drawing energy from it. And at some stage, you have to pay it back or you're going to run out of credit. Yeah. So this concept of balanced independence is a very surprising investment in the relationship, where each person has permission from themselves and the other to do things that lights them up. And I think this is a really important thing, is to follow their hearts, to follow their passions. So Bevan, let me ask you, to describe how you feel when you've been doing something that you're absolutely passionate about. How do you feel when you come back from doing something that just like you love doing?
There are different experiences. I know we go back just about 18 months ago, I went to an open mic night with my guitar and sung, which is something I'd never done before. Through this work, got to the point where that's something I need to do. Absolutely terrified. I know when I went out there, my legs shaking up and down about like this far. Yeah. But, coming out the side of that with this euphoric adrenaline kind of feeling of just, even in face of that fear, but having that wonderful elated sort of experience after that was there's so I've had that experience, and that's very short. It's kind of you're up for 15 minutes, go up there, go do your 15 minutes worth of effort, and then come down with this massive adrenaline rush. But there are other things where I've done more of a slow burn, working on things, and that's I've been going through this recently with building this podcast and working on my own job. This feeling of being able to be tired, but not exhausted. Exhausted's not the right word, right? Yeah. Still tired, but still able to, not that total a release of depression sort of thing almost, right? Yeah. That's become, I can be tired, but I'm just tired. It's just pure tired, not emotional exhaustion, right?
There's a sense of satisfaction in that, isn't there? There's a sense of thrill in that. And compare that to the dull, sullen, fed-up energy that sort of borders on resentment at having to be caged with your partner. So this concept of being able to take things that you absolutely love. For me, it's the sea. For Fiona, it's walking in the mountains. But when we bring that energy back together, there's this. It reignites the passion because now I'm filling up and bringing that energy back into the family. And I walk in with this twinkle going, wow, and I'm enthusiastic about life and I'm interested in what's going on for them. And I'm animated to a point where I'm giving energy back in. And it delivers that flow of enthusiastic conversation. And I describe things. And because I'm describing them as a story, I get engaged in it. And because I'm bringing that energy of like, oh, you've never idea. And this fish swam past and the dolphins and the whales and what I've seen. And all the imaginative stuff, energy, comes back into the relationship. And so that's giving back into the relationship. I think it's a wonderful thing, but it comes from having that balanced independence, and being able to put energy back into the relationship.
Yeah, about the balanced independence. I do like that because there is that level of independence. She's talking about going, going out and doing what you love because you love it.
Yeah,
you don't necessarily, that's but I've seen sort of this idea of two people living. This is where I know I've got a choice for a relationship, and this is what comes up for me when I imagine what I want my relationship to be. And it's two people living their lives.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas one could go out and build what they want to love, and then we sort of come back in and share that together, and then go out again. It's rather than it's not even always together. It's like, hey, if you want to go off for a week and do what you need to, come do that and bring it. And that's sounds like what you're speaking about. Putting that, you go out and charge your batteries and bring about, and you can pour that energy back into the relationship rather than just being there and just sucking off each other all the time.
Yeah.
So
and I think it's kind of more than that, because so often there's a very patronizing imbalance to relationships where one person's kind of earning all the money. And even if they're happy for the other person to spend it, for example, there's invariably this imbalance of independence. Or perhaps it's a dependency that kind of warps the conversations and holds one person back from doing what they love because they don't feel they've got the time or the resources to do so. And it's absolutely critical for each individual in a relationship to have their own sense of purpose, their own sense of freedom, their own sense of achievement. And sometimes that has to be engineered between the two of you. It's romantic to think you just do what you want, because there are situations where you don't have the finances because they've got all the finances. They're the one earning all the money, and the partner's at home, and they don't feel that they can just organize a trip to Paris or to Africa or wherever. And you need to have that sense of independence. And so the structure that you build between the two of you is often something that needs to be put on the table and planned for. That sense of having money that you can spend on coffees without feeling guilty that you're spending their money, or having to find it out of a budget that's not yours just to play with. So there are deeper aspects that kind of stop people from just going and doing what they love, going and doing their passions and following their passions. And often that's something you actually have to discuss as a couple and engineer to readdress what often creeps in through cultural norms or social expectations. So it is a complicated area. It's not just as simple as do what you want, but that's an important part. That's the end result you need to achieve by being aware of it and then addressing it functionally to build the structures that enable you to have that sense of joy and wonder at being alive.
Yeah. And in order to have that conversation, you need to know what it is that you love in the first place. Yeah,
absolutely.
Otherwise you just
it allows you to do it without complaining, because often you're going, oh, so you're not happy with the relationship. No, it's just that I want to do more. Oh, see, so I'm holding you back. You're accusing me. Change isn't easy. People take partners asking for something other than what's been the norm for 10 years to heart. They feel attacked. They feel whatever it is. So you do need a structure by which it's safe to put things on the table. And very much, relationship reignition was designed to deliver, that as a structure that allowed parties to talk about things and uncover values other than, having to know them and put them on the table, but to discover them together, for example, and make games of it. So there is more to it than the basics. We're just talking about the theory behind it, and then there's the practical application, which can be more complicated. And of course, emotion is always the hole in the boat that lets the water in, and we get swayed by by those threats and thoughts. We talk about the thoughts, but the emotions need to be dealt with functionally.
All right. So we've covered a lot. You just mentioned your relationship recognition. We've covered so much about relationships. I'm sure people are asking questions. Where can they find out more about that?
Oh, that's very kind of you. So straight from theguytoknow.com, which is the website, theguytoknow.com, will give you a link directly to relationship reignition as a platform to get resources for dealing with relationships and starting that journey of finding your own sense of confidence and freedom.
Okay. I love that domain, Guy. The Guy to know.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Don't worry about the other guys. Just this
yeah,
one.
no. Guy, the guy to know. That's right. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Guy.
we'll wrap that up. Thanks very much for a wonderful conversation. Learned a lot. We covered heaps. Hope the listeners, hope you guys loved it.
Fantastic.
Thanks for coming.
Certainly happened really quickly, and the time's flown past, which is indication of easy flow. It's been lovely talking to you.